Welcome to the Newsweek lead, listeners. Provincial coalition politics in KwaZulu-Natal is currently on shaky, uncertain ground, with the small kingmaker National Freedom Party trying to call the shots and threatening to pull out of the IFP-ANC-DA government of unity, leaving the Mkhonto-we-Sizwe party rubbing its hands. Our man in Durban, Soyiso Maliti, reports the latest. There next.
What I do know about KZN politicians is that they do like power and they like to exercise power. I don't see the NFP just pulling out of the GPU and throwing their toys away and saying, no, we are not participating in the GPU anymore. I know that the NFP is pressing both the IFP and the ANC for positions as conditions to stay in the GPU. So today's meeting between the IFP and the ANC, as well as the DA, will be very important in how the NFP responds.
Later in our trending topic, well, it's been an especially tough summer for Cape firefighters, now battling the extensive Franschoek blaze. And finally, it's like poetry, they say. The Zulu throne changed hands in the early 70s on this day in South African history, heard at the end of the show.
New episodes of The Lead air Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m.
In Rauby's pointless Braai quiz for today, the question is, which province in South Africa has its own constitution? I'll give you the answer at the end of the show after On This Day in South African History. Get it right and you may score absolutely nothing. Sound good? No Googling. My name's Graeme, this is The Lead, and this is the South African story. Moving to our top story today, and our KwaZulu-Natal correspondent Soyiso Maliti is live on the line now from Durban to tell us a lot more about the province's current coalition uncertainty. How's it, Soyiso? Welcome back to The Lead and all the best for 2026.
Good afternoon, Graeme, and thanks for welcoming me to the show, and good afternoon to News 24 readers. I am fine, Graeme. How are you?
Yeah, man, can't complain. Look, let's get into this, and I think this is going to be super important right from the get-go, is setting the stage, right? We need to give that context about how the current provincial government legislature is set up. There's 80 seats in total. And in order to have the majority, you do need 40 seats and then that plus one to give you the outright majority. What does the current government of provincial unity look like? Who are the main players? Who have the seats that make up that total that gives them that majority? Let's start there.
Thanks, Graeme. So the legislature, as you've said, comprises of 80 seats, 40 of which belongs collectively to the IFP, ANC, and the DA. So if you add the MKP and the EFF, that makes up 80 legislature seats. And out of that 80, the MK has 38 and the EFF 2 and the NFP 1. So in order for any political party or any coalition to govern KwaZulu-Natal, they will need to meet the 50 plus 1 majority, which in this case is 41 seats. And that leaves the MK party out of the administration and in the cold, possibly until the next election. That is, if they win. So the MKP and the NFP, the MKP and the EFF, after the May 2024 general election, committed themselves that they would never work with the ANC, and there were undertones that they would never work with the DA, obviously. So the political reality is that you cannot govern KwaZulu-Natal without either the IFP or the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal.
Yeah, absolutely. And then here comes the National Freedom Party, which is the real kingmaker. I love this in politics, is that, sometimes you get these obscure, smaller parties. The NFP's only really got one seat. Do I have that correctly? So it holds a lot of power in reality. And it currently has one MEC that makes up the provincial cabinet or the committee, right?
Indeed, Graeme. So the NFP does have one seat, and it's currently and rightfully occupied by its provincial chairperson, NFP provincial chairperson Mbali Shinga, who is number one on the party's on what the IC calls the party's province-to-province list to the legislature. So that is, if the first person on the list, the first person that occupies the list, naturally these positions are usually given to them. So it happened that Mbalishinga was the one and only on that list, and then she was given that position. So actually, the NFP and the EFF are the actual kingmakers in the legislature, if you look at it. But the EFF has already alienated itself by vowing to say that they will never work with the DA, they will never work with the ANC. But in reality, in KZN, as I've said, you need other parties to make government and to make government work. So on top of that, the DA is also on record as saying it will never work with the EFF again. And knowing those tensions nationally between the ANC and the EFF, that dynamic of the EFF being a kingmaker, it doesn't work here anymore.
Yeah, so but I'm also of that camp that when it comes to politics, never say never. Eh? You never know what happens on the Tuesday if the announcement comes through on the Monday. Then we had this chaotic motion to unseat the current GPU IFP premier. That's of course Thamsanqa Ntuli. That failed last month. The MKP had brought that motion of no confidence, but it failed, and then the MKP up in arms, a whole bunch of chaos, drama unfolding in the legislature. They wanted the secret ballots. That didn't end up happening. And then what emerged here in terms of the NFP's voting line, the kingmaker here? How did things change here, and what got revealed in the wash, so to speak?
So, interestingly, the NFP pushed the MK to continue with the motion, and they vowed to support it, but it didn't end up working that way because the sole representative of the NFP in the legislature said no, not on her watch. And now, ironically, the casualty of that motion is the NFP and not its intended target, which was the Premier Ntuli and the GPU. So now the NFP is worse off than before the motion, in that they're now openly fighting for that power that one position holds.
So how did MEC Shinga, the chairperson, what was the instruction and what did she end up doing that has now upset the party?
So the NFP has two main structures that relate to the GPU, or its influence in the GPU. It has the National Executive Committee and the Provincial Executive Committee. The National Executive Committee does not have any power in the legislature, but they do oversee Mbalishinga's work. So the NEC, led by its president, Ivan Bonds, instructed Mbalishinga to vote for the MKP's motion to unseat Ntuli, but she voted otherwise. And interestingly, the NFP's constitution favors Shinga's decision on this. But Section 11 says any caucus leader, either in a municipal council or at the legislature or in parliament, that sole caucus leader has power over anyone in the party. And in this case, that is Shinga. So she has power more than anyone else in the party on the decision to vote for or against the motion. And she exercised her duty.
Sure. So it leaves an NFP that is unhappy with itself, so to speak. What is the party deciding to do now? Do we have an understanding of where it sits? Does it want to remain in this GPU coalition? Does it want to exit? What's the current murmurations that you're hearing via your political sources, Soyiso?
So the NFP usually spends its time in court in between the election cycles, and that is caused by frequent infighting from the time it started contesting elections. And right now it looks like the party is headed in that direction again. That is, it's going to court. At least that's what a person close to Shinga is telling me, because this person's saying the Section 11 we're talking about, they're going to use that in court to say Mbalishinga actually has power over the NEC when it comes to that one seat in the legislature.
So interesting. So she's not going anywhere. She's like, I'm going to stay social development MEC, and she's still in that position as we speak, right?
Absolutely. She's still in that position, but new developments are that one of the conditions the NFP wants to put to the GPU or or put to the ANC when they meet is that Balishinga has to go because she didn't toe the party line when it comes to that vote that was had, that motion of no confidence vote in December.
Right. And then there's this NFP leader, Irvin Barnes, in KZN, Soyiso. I know that there was a push for him to get some sort of mayoral position within Zululand, but Zululand is in fact the IFP stronghold. He wanted to be mayor there, but I mean, a GPU configuration, whatever the outcomes there, it also kind of springs to my mind that wouldn't really speak to specifically local government issues. And therein lies the trick. How do you give the NFP, which is a breakaway party from the IFP, a key mayoral position within Zululand? That doesn't seem like something that's going to work out. But I know that it's been a long-standing sort of like demand from the NFP while before the GPU was put in place, right?
That is a good analysis and a question, Graeme. So those discussions started sometime after the formation of the GPU last year, with the NFP requesting the Zululand mayoral post. When that didn't work, they also wanted another mayoral post within the Zululand district, which is they wanted the Nongoma local municipality, and Barnes would have been the mayoral candidate there. So what actually started that process was they've always been talks about reconciliation between the IFP and the NFP, which is a splinter party of the IFP, by the way. So these two parties, after the NFP broke away from the IFP, we started seeing inter-party political violence. So after the GPU was formed, Barnes wanted to, in the spirit of the GPU, he wanted some sort of a government of local unity in Zululand. So that's how those discussions came about. One of the DA and IFP leaders I spoke to over the weekend said they understand the process can go on. There could be those reconciliation talks, but they don't understand why the NFP would make these demands, knowing that the IFP is the majority, and that one of these leaders said Zululand is the heart and soul of the IFP. And if you consider that one of the hallmarks of IFP governance is that they had they had their first legislature in Zululand, in Ulundi. So to them, that is very important that the late Prince Gachabuthelezi built the legislature there. So to them, this is political heritage. Zululand is political heritage to them. It's not something they would give up easily.
Yeah, and it really feels as if whilst, the NFP can't necessarily, align itself internally within the politics, it also kind of, seemingly wants to call all the shots. And here's this very interesting report that you put out just today, Soyiso, which is entitled to our News 24 audience, KZN Coalition Chaos, NFP pushes for positions as IFP, ANC and DA call urgent meeting. That's still trending, of course, on the front page of News 24. And Soyiso, you point out the NFP has now ended up telling both the ANC as well as the Mkhonto weSizwe party, hey, if you want to have meetings, in Nigeria, we've got to have it on the same days. That's what's happening now. That's what you've learned, basically, right?
Correct, Graeme. It is interesting that the NFP seems to be hedging its bets here, but I'm not sure what the game plan is. It seems to me that the NFP has already made its mind up, because if you're holding two meetings with two political parties, two very different political parties, on the same day, when are you going to take the time to consider what one party has put to the table and what the other party has put to the table?
Yeah. So
it seems to me that there's already a predetermined outcome for the NFP. Yeah?
So what are your sources telling you? Which way are they sort of swinging at the moment? I know we're veering into sort of like speculatory territory, which is never good for journalism. But do you have any inclination as to which side the NFP may be pushing further to? A pullout of the GPU? Is that possible?
So to answer your question, what I do know about KZN politicians is that they do like power and they like to exercise power. I don't see the NFP just pulling out of the GPU and throwing their toys away and saying, no, we are not participating in the GPU anymore. I know that the NFP is pressing both the IFP and the ANC for positions as conditions to stay in the GPU. So today's meeting between the IFP and the ANC, as well as the DA, will be very important in how the NFP responds. Also, those meetings that the NFP has with the IFP and the ANC on Friday will give us some sort of picture where the NFP actually is at the moment. But I do know that even if the NFP leaves, the MK party, even if it had the backing of the NFP and the EFF, still needs 3 MPLs from either the IFP and the ANC in order to form a government, since they quite clearly could never work with the DA.
Right. So the MKP has 37 seats, right? So let's just go through this together. 37 seats. It would need the extra 4 to get the majority that it would need with the +1 majority. So say, for example, it takes the EFF's 2 seats. That'll make it 39. And then it gets that 1 seat from the NFP. It'll have 40 seats. But it then would require either the ANC, a rogue a member of the provincial legislature from the DA or the IFP or the ANC to go, you know what, I've had enough of this. I'm gonna suddenly defect and join the MKP. I mean, that doesn't really happen. It would need one of those 3 parties of the current GPU to go, you know what, we're gonna actually go with the MKP this time around and form a whole new government. But I mean, that doesn't seem very likely.
Absolutely, Graeme. And they face other points of friction. That is, MK Party faces other points of friction in that when the MPLs vote on these motions of no confidence, their vote has to be public, has to be seen by other leaders. So it's not a closed, it's not a private vote. You don't get to vote and your vote is secret. So these votes are known. So one, the MK Party has to go to court and to ensure that the voting process is secret. And this has been done before in Parliament, in the National Parliament. So they have to go through that route and deal with existing case law. So it's a point of friction for them. They can't just willy-nilly just start another motion of no confidence and think or assume that MPLs will be able to vote secret.
Yeah, let's end off here, So, I mean, in the absence of all these meetings due to take place and the outcomes of which, I mean, we're both sort of sitting semi in the dark here until we get some sort of finality here on what the NFP really wants to do with its one kingmaker seat. That the reality is that obviously local government service delivery from a provincial perspective suffers in the wake of these very chaotic legislative meetings, with all of this uncertainty looming over how the province conducts itself. That doesn't speak a whole lot of confidence for municipalities where they get their budgets and how they're supposed to implement very crucial initiatives on the ground. Because a lot of the bulk of these infrastructure projects are supposed to be led by the provincial government. I can't imagine that this bodes well at the moment. We need some certainty and we need some stability, no?
Absolutely. So, Graeme, it's interesting that you mentioned the dynamics between local and provincial government. In the eThekwini Metro, the NFP has a deputy mayor in the coalition that the ANC has with the IFP, EFF, and the NFP. So the implications that the ANC wants to remind the NFP about, the implications of leaving the GPU, is a subtle threat from the ANC to the NFP to say, you guys are trying to remove us from you guys are trying to collapse the GPU. And here you are, you have a deputy mayor that is in the eThekwini Metro office through our political collaboration. So that if political leaders are concerned with positions, it puts the service delivery and things such as the budget on the wayside, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this, if you're wondering, why now, is it such an important story? It really is in the context of us moving to municipal elections, because South Africans really need to consider which party they put their vote for if they perhaps might find themselves in a situation again when coalitions spring up and they start wondering why is service delivery suffering so much. It's because these coalitions are being tested at all sides, and politicians really now need to get to a point, I feel at least, that they go, let's put people first ahead of politics for once, and try and make these coalitions work. Yeah, it offers us a sober moment to understand where we are and where we may be going to when it comes to municipal elections. I'm sure it's going to be a tough one out there in KwaZulu-Natal in a couple of months' time, right?
Absolutely, Graeme. And with the MK party making some inroads in the by-elections that we've seen over the past year, the local elections may be as important as the general elections were in terms of the ANC's future in KwaZulu-Natal and the IFP's future as well. So it will be interesting also if the NFP will be able to hold its ground in the municipal elections, because it's been losing seats in councils since the 2021 municipal elections. Yeah.
That's Soyiso Maliti. He's chatting to us live from Durban. I really do appreciate your time. Check out his latest reports on this whole NFP saga within the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Legislature. Makes for interesting, sobering reading as we move to municipal elections in a couple of months' time. And Nkosi Kakula, I really appreciate it. Let's chat soon again. Danko, Soyiso.
You're listening to the latest edition of The Lead on News 24 with Graeme Rowenheimer. If you've got an opinion on what you've heard so far, drop us a short voice note on our WhatsApp hotline. That's 072 562 3179. Trending topic.
Moving to our trending topic, it's day 6 of the Franschoek fire and another day of a hectic summer season for the Cape's brave and resilient firefighters. Nearly 140 hectares of the Cape winelands went up in smoke on day 1 of the fire last Wednesday. Since then, the strong winds have fanned the flames, with some 200 firefighters currently across a 50-kilometre long front line. Authorities say there's been damage to local infrastructure, but the full extent is not yet known to the public. Local government MEC Anton Bredell told News 24's Nicole McCain that they're appealing to National Treasury for more money to fund firefighting aerial support, as there have been double the number of call-outs this season compared to the last. Bredell's warned it's going to be a long, hot summer. Meanwhile, nearly 2,500 people have been left homeless. That's following this weekend's Dunoon blaze on Cape Town's west coast. Nearly 600 shacks were devoured by the fire, and aid relief's been swift. The city's disaster risk management, Charlotte Powell, says rebuilding the area is slowly underway.
The city's solid waste department will remove fire debris from the fire site. Their water and sanitation counterparts are working to restore damaged infrastructure, and Eskom was on site over the weekend to repair damaged electricity infrastructure. Gift of the Givers are providing humanitarian relief. Once the list of affected persons have been finalized, this will be submitted to SASSA to facilitate additional relief.
And finally,
now ending off with On This Day in South African History, that's the 12th of January 1972. Well, on this very day, King Goodwill Zwelithini ascended the Zulu throne after a long regency that's following his father, King Cyprian's death. His reign began in political turbulence. Relations with KwaZulu Chief Minister Mangosuthu Buthelezi were strained almost immediately, and the king's role was soon reduced to a largely ceremonial one. Now, through the 70s and 80s, their rivalry played out against a backdrop of growing resistance to homeland governments and escalating political violence. Now, clashes between Inkatha and UDF supporters intensified, and Zwelithini eventually aligned himself with Buthelezi and the IFP. It's a move that deepened tensions with the ANC. It was only until the 1990s, after assurances from then President Nelson Mandela that the monarchy would be protected and that relations would finally stabilize. King Zwelithini would go on to maintain a more cordial relationship with the democratic government whilst continuing his role as Zulu monarch. Time now for the answer to Rauby's pointless Braai quiz for today, while we asked which province in South Africa has its own constitution. Managed to get the answer without Googling. Well, if you got it right, it was, of course, the Western Cape, but it's largely ceremonial in nature. KwaZulu-Natal once had its own constitution too, but in the mid-90s found that the particular paper was inconsistent with the main overarching constitution and was done away with. Well, the more you know. Well, if this was your answer all along, congrats. You score absolutely Nothing, except the quiet satisfaction perhaps of sounding very informed around the Braai place. Thanks so much for choosing The Lead as your choice news podcast in Mzansi over the last nearly a year or so. The show is going from strength to strength, and we're about to hit 1 million listens across the board. Got anything you want to share? thelead@24.com is our email. And drop us a comment below on all of the platforms we're currently on. Of course, episodes drop like clockwork 7 p.m. every night, Monday to Thursday. So that's Spotify, Apple, YouTube, as well as IONO. Is there something that you think The Lead can do better? We want to hear from you. My name's Graeme, and so long as there's trusted news first, we'll have The Lead.